Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in three ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast.
On the Hockey IQ podcast, we bring on Scott Kleekamp, not Kleekamp, as I screwed up earlier. So, Scott, great to have you. It's always good to have a good Bostonian on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is I was really kind of honored here. It's like an early Christmas present here, for a kind of view myself as a hockey nerd and just to be able to bounce some questions off you that I think about a lot. I started a hockey development nonprofit, and we focus on maybe 10 years old at the youngest up to like 14. And I think it's a really key transitional time for hockey kids. You're going from that mite hockey and it's all fun to a little more serious, competitive, and contact sets in. So we just completely focus on player development, hockey IQ. And so I had some things that we think about, and I wanted to kind of get your perspective. I guess the first place I'll start is how a youth organizer sets up their teams. I think it's really kind of important. And it was one of your thoughts. When I look at college or pro teams, there's always 18 guys on the bench, at least. And the shifts are 30 to 60 seconds. And at the youth levels, I'm seeing rosters where you might have 14 kids rostered, 7 to 9 kids show up, 2-minute shifts, and a bunch of parents yelling at kids to work harder and skate faster. And are we doing ourselves a disservice off the bat by having rosters that are too small and shift lengths that are too long for these youth players?
All right. Mike Bonelli is my man anytime someone's like a hockey director type question. So I'm going to defer a little bit on him, but for shift length, not overly concerning. Obviously it might. So like you just want to get them active, moving around, and the lactic acid really doesn't build up, pre-puberty. So they can go pretty good. Obviously, muscles tire, all that kind of stuff, but you're not getting truly into like the lactic acids, that kind of stuff. So I'm always a fan of if you can tone down the shift length, that's great. Maybe not the first thing I'm attacking at that age group, but as you go up, definitely to peewees and bantams, we want to expand the roster, have more quick shifts, getting used to, okay, maybe that's what 20-second shifts are like. Oh, okay. And just getting that like mental clock burning. Roster sizes can be very difficult, especially with attendance that may be waning and waxing. So obviously you want to have at least 2 full lines and being able to go every other. That way you're not getting out there for 3-4 minute shifts. But it can be tough. I definitely would admit that. So then it's asking, okay, what's the level of commitment from the parents to make sure the players are there? That's always a good question to understand of like, okay, so who's going to be here really steadily and try to get truly like, I call it the 11 warriors. You want to have at least 11 warriors, 1 goalie, 10 skaters. Like that's good. 3 lines is perfectly fine, but definitely don't balloon to the 4 lines that you get with high school hockey and professional. That's just too many bodies. Kids need a little more ice time than that.
Okay. It's interesting because we have the game. I was laughing this weekend. We have definitely 11 warrior game coming up for us. So I'll work that into the pep talk. I think a lot about communication as a coach or as a player, teammate, to parents, and I think you might have had it recently on your blog, but it was an older post you had about this progression of yellers to tellers to askers. And very much that was my progression as a coach. You come in hot and heavy and, Hulk Hogan, let me tell you something, brother, in the huddles. And then you kind of tone it down. You realize you're yelling a little too much. And then you get to asking kids what they're seeing. And I think I'm at an asker stage now. But my question for you is, how have you found success helping parents that you have on teams or players or other coaches? How do you move them along the progression? How do you get a yeller or a teller to become more of an asker?
Conversations. Weekly communications with parents, I think is super, super valuable. Doesn't always have to come from you. It could be part of the other coaching staff or a parent, whatever it is. Like with the team that I coach, one of the coaches always puts out, or one of the team managers puts out a weekly post of like, here's the upcoming information at the bottom. Like, here's the looking forward, here's the payments for each month, all the logistical stuff. Like, I think that's super important. And then also a lot of times, especially my first year with the team, it was a high school team. So there's not that much turnover right now. So they kind of get the idea of what I'm going at, but definitely the first few weeks of the season, I was sending out more emails just to explain, like, what are we doing? What are we looking for? What are we trying to get at? And then figure out what's important. Columbus, we don't have too many yellers, not too many people played hockey in the past. Like Boston probably has a few more hockey parents, that have played the game. Here it's a lot of new parents. So half the time I think they don't know what to yell if they would, other than, maybe skate hard. But no, we have some well-behaved parents. But communication. It's, the three most important things in coaching. And what we can influence. But I did love your first comment, like the yelling to telling to asking, like how many people come into coaching. I'm going to fix these kids. We're going to become the greatest thing ever. We're going to win the championship. It's like, yeah, okay. We need to check ourselves a little bit because, we all had that original thought. Some of us had mentors before we started, like, yeah, you need to back that down. Others have to figure it out the hard way. But for me, it becomes like, how do we create better learners? What's the right dosage of information where it's not overload, but it's giving that passion and it's nibbling away at getting detailed, particularly for the players. And then just for the parents, like getting them educated of what's normal at this age. What are we trying to accomplish? What are our methods and philosophies and why behind all of that? I find it to be super, super important in helping people see the game the way you see, because honestly, that's what we're trying to do, is get people to see it the way we see it, because then it'll be all of us like, oh yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't I do exactly what coach is saying? Or like, yeah, coach is exactly on the ball. I would have done the same thing. So just kind of getting those communications out, making sure people are understanding, and hopefully everyone becomes an ally for the coach.
And you raised like something I hadn't really thought of when you're talking about parent compositions in Ohio versus Boston. Because out here, most of the town leagues are almost entirely coached by former high school players who now are 40 something years old and play beer league. And then the parents in the stands never played hockey. So there's this kind of tale of two cities when it comes to the coaches kind of, I think, purport to have all the hockey knowledge, and the parents are just supposed to sit there and never talk to the coaches. And it sounds like there's a different dynamic out in Ohio where parents are kind of all arriving at the table a little more open-minded and collaboratively.
Yeah, like you don't know what you don't know. So sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a bad thing, right? Like you don't know, and maybe it's a bad thing, or maybe it's a great thing. But sometimes it can be hard to, change old habits. A lot of the stuff coaches start with, in particular, it's like, what did my coaches do in the past that I liked and didn't hate? Or like, skating, but that, was miserable, but we need this, and here we're going to go in line to the end of the goal line. Here's how we're going to do it. That I really encourage people to go through USA Hockey stuff now. Like, it's so good. It was not good in the past. I 100% behind that, but today's stuff is fantastic. Even like having a parent go through a level 1 would be so valuable, or a new coach, or like someone who maybe is like yelling too much. it's really good stuff. Like I'm a big proponent of what USA Hockey's doing, and it's teaching how to teach really rather than like coaching stuff. So it's super fascinating. But yeah, it can be tough. Like I have a coach out there who's the anti-mentor. Like whatever he's doing, I'm like doing the opposite. And I'm like, you haven't changed in 40 years. Like this is really, really enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great how when you said opposite. I use the word counterculture. Like everything we try to do in development, I'm like, the more hockey counterculture we can have, the better. Like we have a middle school team, and like you were saying, have a parent take that level one. The head coach of the team was a former hockey mom, and she took the level one. She's doing the trainings, and she's very much more of a teacher and tone setter. Kids are having a great time, and it's like, she's never coached a hockey game. She's never played hockey, but she's our head coach, and it seems to be working well. And there was kind of two other things I wanted to ask you about related to that, which is you talk about coaches being coaches or teachers, and how important is it to emphasize to your coaches on your team or in your org to take a lot of continuing ed? Like there's that, 1 year of certification you got to do every year. There's safe sport, but I find listening to these podcasts, going to like the NHL coaches mentor webinars, like if you're going to be a hockey coach, should you always be learning, or should you kind of be a little closed off and just kind of, you're like, nope, this is how I do it. This is what's always worked.
All right. Charlie Munger is one of my favorite humans in history of mankind. Just passed away this past week. So, RIP to him, but he had one of the great quotes. I'm just gonna give the synopsis because I'd screw up the quote. But it's like, you're not living a life well if you're not just learning all the way through. And he lived to 99, and like that was his goal. Like you should constantly be learning, right? Like there's always something out there, a new thought, a new way to approach it. Like you can know the same exact thing, but now there's new lingo or fresh lingo for your team. Because if you have the same kids year in and year out, like they're gonna get sick of whatever you started with year one. Like they want something a little bit new or a little different spice to it. So just even like just refreshing yourself in general is always good. But that's one of the reasons I started putting this stuff out, because I'm like, where else can you find good quality things? Like I struggled to find topics that I wanted to talk about. Now I'm the hockey nerd like you, so we're getting into the weeds. But there are some general principles, like you said earlier, of like we're asking questions, we're actually teaching. Like great coaches are great teachers. Like adult education versus youth education. Like what's the difference there? Like there's definitely a major difference in how you go about it. But the principle of being able to get the learner thinking is always fantastic. And the second piece you had of like, do you need an ex-hockey person to be a coach? I would say no. Like, do they accomplish the two most important goals, like the ultimate goals? Like, are we having fun? Because if you're not having fun, you're not going to continue and want to do it. And then do the players want to come to the rink? Like if the kids want to come to the rink and they leave you a little more passionate about hockey and going to sport, that's the ultimate win. Like just take care of the kids. This is kind of coming back to like, we're not trying to fix these kids at all. We're trying to inspire, protect, and guide. And people who can do that are fantastic. Do you need to have the most maximum amount of hockey knowledge? No. Helpful, great. Go learn it, figure it out. Listen to the Hockey IQ newsletter, or listen to the Hockey IQ podcast. Subscribe to the Hockey IQ newsletter. Like there's some good resources out there now. And like you said, like NHL Coach Association puts on some good stuff. Some of it is going to be a little high level tactics. So not for maybe the masses, but there's a lot of good stuff that is. And Ice Hockey Systems, the coaches site, like there's some great resources out there.
And when I think along those lines of like learning and teaching and I feel a lot of pressure. I think parents feel a lot of pressure to start their kids early, or to skate year round, or to do two teams, and this kind of more is better approach. And I don't know if you're familiar with, I'll give you two names of players. There's Ed Jovanovski. He was number one overall pick in 94, played 1,100 games. He started playing hockey at 11. Now he's 6'3" and 220. And then Owen Nolan, I think he started playing hockey at 9. Number 1 overall pick in, I don't know, 1990. Played 1,200 games, but he's like 6'1" and 210. And so, like, my question is, are the days of like a big, huge jock who can come to the sport late at maybe 10, 11 years old and still dominate, are those days done? And is it all Lane Hudson and the Hughes brothers and ultra levels of skill and smaller players now? And how do you balance those two things of like just feeling like you're never doing enough to stay on your highest trajectory?
Is the trajectory and what you want to accomplish like the NHL or professional hockey, or just play the highest you can? I mean, that'd be my question, is like, what are we aiming towards? So I feel like too often the parents want the highest trajectory humanly possible. The kids just want to have fun or have the thrill of getting better. So does, like, more is somewhat better. I mean, like, skating is skating. Like, if you can improve your skating, it's a massive game changer. But there's marginal gains. What's the next little bit? And there's something to be said about being able to, reset your body and reset your mind. Like, Patty Kane just had his hip operated on. So there's some long-term health stuff. I got plenty of ex-teammates that have plenty of hip problems. Like, there's a massive advantage to going and playing a sport that has a different movement pattern, which is really easy with hockey because it's just, go run. There's not many others with skating. Like, getting off your skates. There's a few NHLers here around town in Columbus, and I had a few up in Cleveland, like professional players, and like they're taking off at least a month of like not even stepping on the ice each summer. Like, and that's the professional ranks. Back that down. If you're a kid, like, go play a sport, go fishing, go hiking, and any activity other than hockey. Your body needs the reset, your mind needs the reset, and you'll actually become better because of it. It may take you a few, extra skates to get back up to speed if you go straight from like someone playing all year round and going to training camp. But eventually those kids catch up. It's, maybe a month or less, and then you're perfectly fine. You're back to, normalcy. But yeah, like, you don't need to start at age 2, the proverbial like throwing the skates on before it can walk, and going year round. It a lot of times becomes detrimental. We have a lot of good teams young here in Columbus, and as the age groups go up, you can see the effect of kids dropping out, and it isn't sustainable. It's just too much of a marathon rather than a sprint.
Yeah, because I wanted to get into some of those overuse injury topics, and doing too much skating too early. And one of the reasons we started our thing was we wanted to emphasize on all the stuff you can do off ice to develop as a player. Because I think for some parents, they think if I drop my kid off at the rink and if I sip coffee, if I do that enough, like, greatness will happen. And I think, we try to emphasize things like, film work, film review, and trying to build their hockey IQ off ice. And I was just wondering, what are some of the, for kids, I mean, adults can read your blog and listen to your podcast, and they have the attention span to kind of go long form like that. But as far as bringing in people, I think you bring people into your teams, to, leaders or CEOs or different thinkers to give perspectives. Like, what are some of the things you can do to help your hockey IQ, help you as a hockey player without putting skates on and doing away from the rink?
One, if you're starting out, you need to learn hockey talk, hockey slang. I think that was my first post, or one of my first posts on the coach's site. Like, just figuring out, like, if someone says be above the puck, like, what the heck does that mean? Oh, be on the defensive side of the nearest opponent, or like my check. Like, okay. So I think that's super important, especially if they haven't been around it. Like, you can talk till you're blue in the face all day, but if someone doesn't understand the words, like, it's, a meaningless conversation. So I would definitely say that. The other piece I would love to touch on, kind of related to this, is like, we're talking about learning. When do we go from mimicking to actual learning? Like, if we're doing skating and power skating before U10, very doubtful we're actually doing good actual deep learning of like, oh, here's what a good stride here is. Here was what it feels like. The kid's looking and just mimicking more than anything. Like, we're not at that stage where we can really have hard abstract thoughts. So there's that challenge. And, the youngest kids in particular, we all do this, but like learning through play, like keep them moving, interacting, get them doing this, that, and the other. And you can start chipping away at things as they age. But understanding the mimic phase versus like the truly learning it, and then making sure that we have the building blocks to learn, which would be having the language, same as humans, right? Like, you gotta have the language, then you can talk about, the romantics and the Romans and history and whatever else, and English, math, blah, blah, blah. So making sure like those pieces are done. And then I love to challenge my players. Like, I will just shoot them a Hockey IQ newsletter. Like, read this, come back, tell me what you took away from it, and then have a short conversation. Or like, oh, what else was confusing? Or like, oh, this inspired you. Check this one out too. Or check this out, blah, blah, blah. And kind of get them going on their own journey, or at least get them looking at some concepts, some hockey. If they may not be that person that's going to, jump at it, but at least they're seeing something. So like, I know coaches that give the Hockey IQ newsletter as the homework assignment to their team, and then they do chalk talk on it. So that kind of stuff. Others, one-on-one, like, here, read this. The greatest compliment ever came from my buddy Jared Lavender, is I think our second guest on this podcast. It's like, I literally give a newsletter to my player on what they're sucking at, and then they read it and they play better. I'm like, that's the ultimate, right? Like, problem solved. You didn't really have to do too much. You're just handing out homework. Like, that's the greatest thing ever. So just, getting them starting to challenge them a little bit to go beyond just like showing up at the rink is great. And then figuring out, like, can they handle it? What's the right dosage? That's very group specific, person specific.
I really agree with, I guess you kind of raised the point of how do you deal with addressing a player's weaknesses and flaws? Because in the 80s, you'd just be told, you'd be yelled at, you're slow, you need to do this. And I think that shuts a lot of kids down, especially in hockey, because the game's so fast. You don't want to make a mistake and get yelled at. So you just tend to avoid things. But how do you, like, we tend to just try to praise the things they do well, especially when we do film work. We just show what they're doing well. But you do need to address what they're not doing well. And so, like, other than kind of shadow sending a newsletter that talks about that topic and hoping they read it, what are some of the most effective strategies you find to address player weaknesses, but not, destroy trust or not make them insecure about things, and help them overcome those?
Yes, beautiful question. Praise in public, critique in private. So I'm having a lot of conversations like before practice, one-on-ones, like just talking about their game, like how you feel about your game, blah, blah, blah. Here's something I noticed, or I'll pull like a clip. I've just got my phone, screen recorded it off a live barn, and I'm just like putting up against the wall. Like, here, I just want you to watch this clip. Let me know what you think. I'm not the one exactly critiquing it, but I'm pulling the very obvious clips. Like, you were standing on the half wall, the other team had the puck. Where do you think you should have been? Maybe in the slot. Okay, yeah, much better. Good job. Like, you figured it out. Like, I'm not actually doing much teaching at this point, just pointing out the obvious. But yeah, any kind of like, I love that, the whole like praise in public. Who doesn't love to be told in front of their peers, like, oh, you did such a good job, this is awesome? Or like, we have a group me for our team, like, send out clips of like, one of my players he's not the biggest hustler out there, but he did a great hustle play twice in one sequence where I'm like, oh, this is awesome. You got this, like, fantastic. And of course, like, he loved that, in the group chat. And then, he's feeling good. So make sure I point that out at practice, try to get some confidence and get repeatability where, okay, we're starting to hustle a little bit more. We're starting to compete more. And then, in private, I'm pulling him to the side. And I'm like, so your back checks weren't so good, but the offensive puck recoveries, love the hustle there. But we need to take that, move it to our back check, making sure we're getting back, stopping the right spots, and doing it that way. Sometimes I'm printing out physical copies of the newsletter, like, here you go. Or I'm sending out sometimes links because, we can just direct message in that app to the players, like, check this out. Let's talk about it before next practice.
And you mentioned kind of like in locker rooms, like holding up cell phones with live barn footage or sending clips to kids. And I assume you use a decent amount of film, and we try to use that. But I know a lot of coaches that they go to the game, like they volunteer a lot of time for sure to be at practices and games and practice planning, but they've never heard of live barn. They don't watch any film. There's no film being sent to players either of their games or just, college or NHL clips for theory. How important is introducing film work? And I guess, like, how far can you go? How well can you develop as a hockey player if there's zero film work happening other than watching the Bruins?
You definitely need it, but I know plenty of high-level players that don't watch film outside of what their coaches show them. You can give them access to film all you want, all the shifts, pre-cut, blah, blah, blah. Unlikely they're actually going to watch it. I'm not going to name names on that one, but there's some really high-level players who'd be absolutely shocked at how little film they actually watch. But you definitely need it. Like, you don't, like, you got to get outside of your body in some capacity and look at yourself, because everything's normal to you. Like, oh yeah, I'm doing the right things, blah, blah, blah. And then you watch it on film, you're like, I am so terrible. Like, I remember the first time I watched myself on film and I'm like embarrassed. I'm like, I thought I was good at this game. I am so awful. But then, like, okay, fix this, that, and the other. And I'm like, all right, I'm not at least terrible. I mean, average at best, at least. So, like, where are we going with this? So you don't need a ton of it, but you definitely need to watch yourself a little bit, because some of the things you'd be like, unbelievable. Like, I can't believe I did that. I had no idea. Just being able to, that idea of, like, how can you self-critique yourself and become like your own best coach? Like, that's the ultimate goal. Like, yeah, I love, like, Don Granato. He's one of my favorite coaches. And he always talks about that for young players. Like, we need to have a good self-assess so we can fix it really fast and hit that learning curve and get up to speed. And like, Owen Power is the one that, like, he kept talking about that when Owen was here. Like, he's got a great self-awareness, a great self-reflection. He figures out, what he messed up and fixes it. And he's learning super fast, like, blah, 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 all the great players in Buffalo. So I think that's super important. How can we help encourage that? Again, question asking is great. Getting them thinking, getting them in the idea of, like, becoming their own best coach.
I think that raises, like, the other question of, and then you kind of touched on it, get them thinking. But if you have a youth practice, it's maybe a little coach led. Here's the drills, here's what we're doing. The player goes, player works hard, players doing their best, they're executing well. You go to the game, hop on ice, you play your best. There doesn't seem to be a lot of room in there unless the player's doing it on their own for, like, that self-reflection and self-review. Like, as a coach, do you need to deliberately plan for how am I going to have those conversations with players to help them start learning? Like, you need to be self-aware, you need to be reflecting, or does it just happen on its own and the kids figure it out?
No, they don't just figure it out. You need some coach. Like, there's a reason why there's a coach in the first place. One, obviously the organization, but two, to point out the obvious sometimes. Like, for me, whenever I've got an activity, I'm pointing out, okay, here's what I want to see. Here's what I am looking for. So, like, it's a simple, like, transition drill, 4 dots facing each other towards the middle, make a pass. You go up, transition to the outside, show your chest to the player and go down the ice, take a shot on net. Okay, well, what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for you to shoulder check and look up ice, then look back for that pass. You can do it all in one motion even, but I'm telling them I'm looking for this. And then I'm like, okay, I try to do whistleless drills and coachless drills. I don't blow a whistle. I'm not involved. Like, that allows me then to observe and have conversations, or I'm, like, pointing out, I'm like, blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for the shoulder check. I've seen you go 3 times and we haven't seen it. Next one needs to be there. Or I'll, like, just talk them through as the drill. I'm like, come on, you need shoulder check, shoulder check, shoulder check. I need to scan, whatever it is. So, like, that was the one from yesterday's practice. I'm like, most kids picked it up from me saying it before we went and did it. And then there are a few players that needed some reminders, some people that needed me to demonstrate it. Like, here's when we're looking, here's what we're looking for, and just getting them in that habit of doing that, and then asking questions. Some drills, it's here's just the one element I want to see and I'm looking for it. I'm talking about it. And then, if you got like small sided games, there's a little more to it. And then now you're maybe having a conversation. That was a tough pass to make there. What were you thinking? Like, blah, blah, blah. What if you look that way before doing that? You think that would work better? Oh yeah, I'm gonna give that a try. All right, let's see if you can look one way and pass the other. Little details like that. But I think it starts with removing yourself as coaches from the activities themselves as much as humanly possible, and using your whistle as little as possible. I don't even use a whiteboard anymore. I'm explaining it. I want there to be some friction. One, where the kids have to like show ownership of like figuring it out, and then two, like as coaches, we talk, and then they have to translate that to action. I think that's a super powerful transfer. And how can we get them doing that at practice? I find really valuable and something I do. So if you watch my drills, the first few times they do it, like I explain it, but maybe I leave out a key piece, or I'm explaining it to the best of my ability, but I'm not concerned if it's not exactly that the first time. Like the drill needs to happen, the activity needs to happen, but I want the players working together, figuring it out, talking like, well, you do this, I do this, or like, we got to be here, and trying to find ways to make them lead within the practice itself, like the practice within the practice. That's where my mind goes with this kind of stuff. Like the activities are table stakes.
So you're not a new puck, blow the whistle every 5 second guy, because there's kind of
no, not at all.
And can you do that in a way that's player centric? Because I hear a lot of coaches will say, okay, I want to see a pass every 2 seconds, and if we don't, it's new puck, it's next group, and does that tend to get kids passing quicker, or is it like that's just kind of not going to be too effective?
Yeah, I mean, there's a million ways to skin this cat. I've got high school kids, so push-ups are perfect. Like, we'll do a 5-on-5 scrimmage. Any turnover, 5 push-ups. Like, if the puck died on your stick, 5 push-ups. And the problem we're trying to solve is we're trying to solve passing your problems. Like, we have a ton of kids that make the pass because they're having issues. They pass it right to a teammate that's also having issues. So if you're doing that, like, that's not good. You're handcuffing them. So then I'm like, okay, it's not you. You're the one doing the push-ups, whatever it may be. Or like, we'll play 3-on-3 cross ice. Every pass that you make adds to the goal. So you score off a pass, that's 2. You score off breakaway, it's 1. And now we're incentivizing it rather than requiring it, because it drives me mad when we have player or coaches. So like, you got to make 2 or 3 passes and then you can score a goal. Well, they're just going to stop playing hockey. Like, they're not actually thinking about the risk reward. And you add an incentive structure. Now we're thinking risk reward. Like, I know the Chicago Steel, like, if you do a one-timer finish, like, that's always 2, it's double in their games. So they're looking for quick shots, pass to shoot, Royal Road plays, and they're just incentivizing it constantly. Like, everyone knows in the Steel organization, that's the rule. You do that, you get extra. What do you think they're going to be looking for? I get a 2-for-1 rather than a 1-for-1. All right. Love it.
How important is it for a coach to give players and maybe even parents that alternate reward system where we're not just looking at the scoreboard? It's not just goals. It's like you're saying, it's 2 points for a one-timer, or it's, I want a head check, I want you to scan here. Like, giving kids multiple points that they can compete on and rack up stats, because everyone loves to do that. Like, how do you do that, or how important is that to do for your players?
Yeah, what gets measured gets rewarded, right? Like, and it gets repeated. So that's super important. I know of a youth organization, I don't know if they still do this, but they would keep score on whatever they worked that week. So they'd have like the theme for that week. Could be scanning, could be tight turns, whatever it is. And they would score the kids on that. So all the kids would get to see what was from that week. I forget who did it. One of the coaches or parents would go through and score, like, how many times did you do a tight turn? How many times did you scan? And whatever that week's was, like, that was the ultimate scoring system, rather than looking at the scoreboard. So the kids would see that as their score for the week. Like, oh, I did 5 tight turns this game. I need to get that number up. So I need to follow up with that organization now that you talk about it. I'm going to have to see if they're continuing to do that, or if they've gone away with it over time. But I thought that was super neat, because I went out and I saw then oldest of ages before they graduated to high school. And it was amazing the level of technical skills along with the hockey IQ. Like usually there's something missing, like a gaping hole in a lot of players' games, but they had so good fundamentals. It was amazing. I was like, clearly something's done right here. I need to learn more. So I'm going to follow up with that organization to see if that's still done, because it was noticeable how amazing the basis of these players. Like they could go to any coach anywhere and be perfectly fine.
But well, I think that there was one other thing I wanted to ask you kind of on that thing, which is like the importance or need to maybe play players at different positions. Like I was a college football player and I was a lineman, and so I have no idea what wide receivers do, what defensive backs do, the footwork, none of it. And in hockey, I don't know that you can really have much of a future if you're just like, I'm a stay-at-home defenseman, or I'm just a, weak side winger. Like you kind of need to know how to play all over the ice. And if you're not challenging those players with playing multiple positions, are you doing them a disservice? Like I know kids have their comfort zones, but how do you incentivize them to give themselves permission to make those mistakes and play where they're not comfortable and kind of grow a little bit in that regard?
And sometimes they will go kicking and screaming, but at the end of the day, they will thank you. A few months later when they're like, oh, that was super helpful. That forward that doesn't want to play defense, you put him back on defense. Like you're playing defense for the next 2 weeks. Like you're going to figure this out. Like don't suck. And slowly but surely they're, like, oh, why am I doing this? Blah, blah, blah. And then eventually like, okay, I got to learn it. I'm not going anywhere. Better to figure it out. And then by the time they go back to forward, they're like, okay, that was super valuable. I loved it. But for me, like practices, like how do we set up jerseys? Like for me, it should be 2 or 3 jersey colors and that's it. So we got 2 or 3 teams and then everyone plays everything. I hate the like defense only, like defense in black. Stupid. Like I'm going to try to put everyone in every position. So it's going to look like the rainbow out here. So for me, I'm like 2 or 3 colors max. And then everyone plays everything in practice. Like Scotty Bowman used to put Sergei Fedorov back on defense. We all thought he was crazy. And then he ends up playing defense for, I think, the Blue Jackets and another team. It was the Ducks or something. But it was like, okay, if the NHL values that, why can't we all the way down? But there's so many, like a defenseman is going to rim the puck a lot less when they play winger and they get a rimmed puck and they're like, this sucks. Like they're going to feel for their teammates. They're going to build empathy. I've never heard like, oh, he's such an empathetic person or she's such an empathetic person. It has to be like a bad thing. And here's one way to grow it. Like go play someone else's position and see how you're screwing them over.
Well, I guess that raised, maybe that'll be my last question for you that it raised. Cause there's, when you say rim the pucks, is the 2 skills I never see really being worked on much when I say youth, I mean 16U and younger, is board work and face-offs. And it seems like that's a huge part of high school hockey, higher level hockey, getting pucks off the boards, winning face-offs, knowing what you're supposed to do there. Are those just very under practiced, or, what are your thoughts on like, when do you introduce, like, let's learn how to take face-offs. Let's learn what each position does here and at a youth level.
I'm currently teaching my team about face-offs, so this is perfect. It's like you're watching my practice yesterday. So we did like groups of 3. Everyone's working on draws. We're talking about techniques. We're talking about what are the logistics of a face-off. Like a ref blows his whistle. What does that mean? Oh, 5 seconds till he's going to drop this puck. I better be ready to go and locked in. Another thing is like how many kids actually talk about what they're about to do off the face-off. Like I'm going to go here, you go there. Go to the NHL. They're constantly like grouping up and then going to the face-off. It's like a huddle in football and then they break. So I think that is a big piece of it. So face-offs was the first one. What was the other? Oh, the rims.
Board work,
pucks. Yeah, board work. Board work's kind of tough to teach from a completion because there's so many little elements that goes into great board work. Obviously, small-sided games in tight spaces in the corners, like you can kind of learn some board work there. But rims are super hard to pick up. There's some good warm-up stuff you can do. You get pucks starting at like the half wall, you rim it down, someone grabs a puck off, attacks the net, gets a quick shot, jam play kind of type thing. And just like nibble away at forehands and backhands, make sure we're going both ways, or like, a bunch of pucks start up behind the net. and coaches are rimming it both directions, or players are rimming it both directions. Guy picks up off the wall, chip it and go shoot at the far side. Like, you know, a million different ways to do that. But yeah, I know for a fact that Nikita Kucherov will pay like a skills coach a ridiculous amount of money that would make your head spin, and he'll just go work on picking up rimmed pucks for hour plus. So it is an absolutely valuable skill to figure out and master. And there's a lot of people that just like pitchfork it in there, and then their puck goes shoom, right to the middle of the ice, and you know the other team can have it apparently. But yeah, picking up rimmed pucks, I think that's something I would love to see more. And then, you know, face offs, there's so many elements. For me, I start with my Hockey IQ newsletter, of course, of just like what is our trigger, like knowing the logistics of the face off and the line changes during stoppages, and then what are we looking for, which for me is the hand of the ref is going to go up before it goes down. It's just so hard to go straight down. Like it's going to go up a little bit and then down, and when it goes up, okay, we're all five of us better be doing our jobs. Wingers better be moving, centers getting leverage, and going from there. But yeah, for me, I just literally did this yesterday. Everyone splits up into groups of three. Some have some fours, dropping pucks, working on face-offs, and just I'm circling around, giving tips and tricks as I see things.
And I guess when you mentioned the Kucherov getting his skills coach, it made me wonder how does parents or players know when to bring people in? And I think the first skills coach I see people bringing in is always a skating coach or shooting coach. Are those the first ones you should be bringing in at, you know, age 12 or whatever? Or is it strength and conditioning coaches, mental health, you know, mental performance coaches? Or it depends, you know, is always a good answer. But how do you know when to supplement with outside specialist coaches?
Such a personalized question, obviously. You know, when did the kids kind of want a little bit extra? Are they asking for extra? You know, maybe the parents can start the process. But you wouldn't want to continue the process unless the kid is excited to go back and is asking to go back. You know, because a lot of people they don't know what to ask for, but eventually they're like, oh, this is great. I want this. I want more of this. Yeah, I find it very difficult because I used to do a bunch of individual skill stuff up in Cleveland. The economics worked a lot better than down here in Columbus. I don't do it anymore, even just with like access to ice. But yeah, like squirts and under was really difficult because it's that mimic phase. Like just go stick handle, go play box hockey with your friends. And then some of the gifted peewees, you can start to have like actual conversations and talk about skills, and they'll actually be retained really well. Right. Because we all get good at what we practice, and you know, skills stuff can be great. And when I talk skills, I'm like, there's the decision making part of it, and then there's the actual technical execution of the technique. And most of the time it's just, can you execute, rather than, okay, when do we use this, how do we use this, you know, what are the cues, triggers, you know, and those are the conversation. That's the asking the questions, like, when would you do this, or what would you be looking for on this, and kind of guiding through. So I would say, sorry, it's no longer peewees and squirts. So we got U8s and 6s and U10s and 12s and 14s. So I would say, like, you know, 10-year-old would be like the earliest I'd even consider. Otherwise, you know, just go have fun and go play. You know, starting 11, 12, okay, maybe we're starting to get some specialized things. And then, you know, if a kid really wants it at older ages, you know, now we're looking for specific stuff. The kids should slowly start to drive the conversation, start to drive what they're doing, you know, and trying to give ownership and finding ways that we can give ownership for them to drive their own bus is super important. I always point people to a YouTube video I did for, I don't know if it was part of the Columbus Hockey Coaches Summit, but Matt Cook, and it's Koch. I want to say it was character development from U6. I'm going to look this up really quick. But it's really good about going through the ages of like what is proper, because he's had all of the different age groups from learn to skate all the way up to college, coaching Akron currently, but it's fantastic. I definitely would say he's one of my mentors.
And I guess related to that, like maybe kind of wrap things up with like the big universal question is, as coaches or as parents, I think we all have the best intentions. We just want the kids to thrive and be happy, but interlinked in there is this desire for them to compete, and have you found a way to coach compete? Like, do kids either arrive with high level of compete and it is what it is, or are there things you can do as a parent or coach to increase a player's approach to the game where they're just going to compete more?
I mean, personality drives everything, right? In life, your personality, they're the things that were given to you from your folks that are definitely there. And then there's, the environmental factors, like, is compete rewarded? How is it rewarded? Like, for me, I tell my players, I'm like, never show another teammate mercy. Like, if you're the better player, do it. The opponent is not going to give mercy. If you are not going hard in practice, you are letting yourself down because you're not pushing your edges. And now you're letting your teammates down because they're not getting realistic reps. So I talk about that constantly. It's like the iron sharpens iron conversation. And then just, put them in competition type stuff. Like, if you're going around a cone, not much competition there. Oh, they're being chased by a teammate. They're going to compete a little bit harder. Like, someone's actually going to go take my puck. The best way to increase competition is putting them against another human being. Easy as that. So that would be my 2 cents on that subject. But the video is character development 8U to U14 and beyond, Matt Cook, and that's KOCH. Absolutely fantastic video. I'm gonna have to link that in the show notes here. But yeah, literally, like, starting with, like, okay, when do you take your bag to the locker room? When does try to tie your skates, even though it may not be great, versus, I'm not going to spoil it, but it's fantastic all the way up. And he gives it by, the different age groups of what that should look like. And it's a great resource for coaches and players and parents.
Well, I can't wait to check it out. I mean, this was super fun, man. I feel like I could go on all day, I just,
Two hockey nerds, crazy.
But yeah, now I'm excited to watch this video before the kids have breakfast here. So, this is phenomenal. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thanks again, Scott, for reaching out, connecting. Can't wait to have some more conversations.
Looking forward to it.
That concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.